A billionaire mocked her in a language he thought she couldn't understand. But her silence was the warning he never saw coming. He thought his money gave him the right to judge her. She thought staying silent would keep the peace. But when the billionaire called her just a server, he had no idea the woman standing beside his table understood every word, nor how fast his life would shatter because of it. What happened next would prove him wrong in an instant. Rain slid down the wide windows of Harbor Lights Grill, turning the reflections of the golden chandeliers into trembling streaks on the glass. The dinner rush was loud tonight, silverware chiming, glasses clinking, soft jazz playing from overhead speakers. Maya Carter steadied her breath, balancing 3 plates on her arm as she stepped across the polished floor. Her black curls were pulled back into a neat bun, her uniform freshly ironed, even though she'd rushed here straight from helping her mother take her evening medication. She moved with the quiet grace of someone who had learned long ago that being invisible was sometimes safer than being seen. Table 12. The VIP table. The one with men in tailored suits worth more than her apartment building. As Maya approached, she could hear their laughter. Loud, sharp, the kind of laughter that fills a room because it feels entitled to. Ethan Ward sat at the head of the table, leaning back in his chair like someone accustomed to being obeyed without question.
His hair was a clean, expensive kind of dark, swept back to show a face carved from confidence and money. He was younger than most billionaires, early 40s maybe, but his eyes held the detached coldness of someone who'd already forgotten what struggle looked like. The moment he noticed Maya, a smirk flickered across his face. "Ah," he said lightly, turning to his companions as if narrating a performance. Then, switching to Italian, a language few people in Baltimore would understand, he said, "Just a server, nothing more." The men around him chuckled into their wine glasses. Maya didn't flinch, but she felt something tighten deep in her chest. She understood every word, every syllable wrapped in arrogance.
She'd spent years studying languages, absorbing them the way some people absorb sunshine. Italian had been her favorite, melodic, poetic, romantic. Now it felt like a knife. Still, she smiled. A polite, contained smile. The kind you give when you're paid to serve, but not to feel. "Your entrees," she said softly, placing each plate before them with careful precision. Ethan glanced up at her again, amusement dancing in his eyes as if he were testing her. "Just a server," he repeated in Italian, slower this time, like he wanted to ensure she caught his tone, even if he believed she couldn't catch his meaning. Maya kept her posture straight. She'd grown up in West Baltimore, where kids learned to steel themselves early, against comments, assumptions, lowered expectations.
Her grandmother used to say, "Some folks talk loud because their hearts are small." Maya remembered that now as she gently set down the last plate. She turned to leave. Behind her, the men continued their conversation, still in Italian, still assuming she didn't understand. "She probably didn't finish high school. She looks like she's working 3 jobs. Either way, she won't be here long." Each remark landed like a quiet bruise, invisible but deep. But Maya didn't break stride. She'd had years of practice swallowing pain with silence, years of hiding brilliance behind humility because life had demanded it. A waiter passing by whispered, "You good, Maya?" She nodded, though her throat felt tight. "Yeah, I'm fine." But she wasn't. Not really. As she slipped back into the kitchen, the warm steam and clatter of pots greeted her like a refuge. Yet even here, Ethan's words followed her, lingering like a shadow. She set her tray down, leaned against the counter, and took a slow breath. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Not tonight. Not over men who didn't know her story, and definitely not over a billionaire who thought she couldn't understand him. If only he knew the truth, that she understood far more than he ever expected. That she had once dreamed of teaching language, not serving tables. That she had once belonged to lecture halls, not the narrow aisles between linen-covered tables. But dreams cost money, and money ran out. Someone called her name from the dining room. She lifted her chin, steadied her breath, and pushed the kitchen door open. The golden light washed over her again. Why did she stay silent when she clearly understood every word he said? That was a question Ethan might soon regret not asking. Back in the kitchen, the door swung closed behind Maya, muting the noise of the dining room, but not the sting of the words she'd just heard. The warm glow of heat lamps washed over stacks of plates waiting to be served, and the smell of garlic butter and seared salmon clung to the air. Maya rested her hands on the counter, steadying herself. She wasn't shaking, but the tremor was inside. Quiet, tight, pulsing through the memory of every time someone had looked at her and decided she was less than she was.
"Order up, Maya," the head cook called, sliding a tray toward her. She nodded, swallowed hard, and forced her voice to be steady. "Got it." She carried the tray out with practiced calm, weaving between tables, ignoring the ache building behind her ribs. She had mastered this, hiding storms beneath a still surface. But tonight, Ethan's voice replayed in her head. "Just a server, nothing more." It wasn't the worst thing anyone had said, but something about the way he said it, so casual, so certain, made the old wounds reopen like they'd been waiting for an excuse. When Maya returned to the kitchen again, she let her breath out slowly. Her co-worker, Lena, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a constant air of worry, approached with a towel over her shoulder. "You look pale," Lena said softly.
"They giving you trouble out there?" Maya forced a small smile. "Nothing I can't handle." That wasn't true, and Lena knew it. But she didn't push. She'd seen enough young women in this job to recognize the face of someone carrying more than trays. As Maya refilled water glasses at the service station, her mind drifted backward, to a lecture hall splashed with autumn sunlight, to a younger version of herself raising her hand confidently as a professor wrote Italian verb conjugations across the board. She had been the star of the class, the girl who switched between languages as easily as breathing. Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, each one had felt like opening another window to the world. She had dreamed of becoming a linguist, of writing books, of traveling the world with nothing but a backpack and a notebook full of translations. Professors had encouraged her. Classmates had admired her. Scholarships had followed her like stepping stones. Until the night everything changed. Her mother's heart attack, the hospital bills, the second job, then the third. Dropping out temporarily, though she'd known deep down she might never return. The weight of that memory pressed on her now, making her breath catch. She blinked hard until the burn in her eyes faded. She had no space for tears tonight. "Carter." Her manager's voice snapped from across the room, sharp as the crack of a ruler. "Table 4 needs refills. Move." "Yes, sir." She grabbed the pitcher and walked briskly into the dining room. The manager didn't hate her. He just hated anything that slowed service. To him, Maya was a pair of hands, not a person with a life outside the dim glow of Harbor Lights Grill. As she passed the VIP table again, she heard Ethan's voice, still in Italian, telling a story about a deal he'd closed that morning. His companions laughed, clinking glasses. None of them looked her way now. To them, she was part of the furniture, part of the background, important only when needed. But as Maya leaned toward a nearby table to pour water, Ethan's gaze flicked toward her. Something unreadable flashed in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe. But he didn't say a word. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look uncomfortable. That hurt more than the original insult. When she returned to the kitchen, she pressed her palms to the cool metal counter. Her breath shuddered. She didn't want their approval. She didn't need it. But she hated the way his words pulled her back into memories she'd worked so hard to bury. Flashes of voices from her childhood echoed through her mind. She's smart, but girls like her don't get far. Don't dream too big, Maya. You're lucky to get anything at all. But her grandmother's voice rose above them all, warm, certain, unwavering. You were born with a flame, baby girl. Don't let this world blow it out. Maya closed her eyes and let the memory hold her for a moment. Her grandmother had passed 3 years ago, but the comfort of those words still wrapped around her like a blanket. A timer beeped loudly, jolting her back. She picked up another tray and stepped into the dining room again, her face composed, her walk steady. She passed Ethan's table without looking his way, but Ethan looked at her, just for a second. Something about her silence unsettled him. Most people reacted to him, eager, intimidated, sometimes starstruck. She didn't. She didn't even look annoyed. And that somehow made him feel small, an unfamiliar feeling for a man who spent his life towering above everyone else. Lena whispered to Maya as she passed, "That guy's been watching you." Her tone suggested caution, not interest. Maya exhaled softly. He'll forget I exist in 10 minutes. But deep down, she knew he wouldn't. Something had shifted. She could feel it, like a storm building far off the coast, silent but inevitable. She carried a tray to a corner booth, cleared plates, wiped down tables, all while the weight inside her grew heavier. She had learned to endure it, but endurance had a cost. By the end of her shift, her feet ached, and her back felt knotted. She tied her coat around her shoulders, ready to walk home through the damp Baltimore night. But as she pushed open the back door, the cool air rushing against her face, she paused. Her reflection ghosted back at her in a puddle. Tired eyes, strong jaw, a resilience she never gave herself credit for. A woman who had survived more than anyone in that VIP room would ever understand. She didn't know that this night, this exact moment, was the quiet breath before everything in her life changed. She stepped into the rain, unaware that someone inside the restaurant was still watching her go, wondering why a waitress walked like someone carrying the weight of the world and yet refused to bend under it, and why she had understood him when she wasn't supposed to. The rain fell heavier now, tapping against dumpsters and echoing through the narrow alley behind Harbor Lights Grill. Maya pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders and began the 15-minute walk home. Wet pavement reflected the neon signs from nearby storefronts, pink, blue, yellow, stretching their colors along the street like smeared paint. Cars hissed past in the distance. The city felt half asleep, half restless, the way Baltimore always felt after 10 p.m. As she crossed the parking lot, she heard the restaurant's back door open again. Footsteps, but Maya didn't turn around. She knew the sound of hurried steps from a coworker coming out for a smoke, or the manager checking the dumpsters. Nothing in her life ever followed her home, except bills and responsibilities. She walked under a flickering streetlight, rain dripping from the ends of her curls. She thought about her mother waiting in their small apartment, the medicine bottle nearly empty, the rent reminder on the kitchen table. Her feet were tired, but the weight on her chest was heavier. If life was a storm, tonight felt like the wind before it broke something loose. Several blocks away, in front of the restaurant's main entrance, Ethan Ward stepped out beneath the awning. He looked uncomfortable in the rain, like someone who wasn't used to being outdoors without an assistant holding an umbrella. His friends lingered behind him, still chatting, but Ethan barely heard them. His mind kept circling back to Maya, her silence, her strength, the steady way she held herself. Something about her unsettled him. Before he could make sense of that, a sound cut through the air, a shout, a thud, a sharp gasp. It came from the sidewalk just around the corner. Ethan's head snapped toward the noise. His father, Mr. Raymond Ward, had walked a few steps ahead of the group, waving goodbye to the driver who was pulling the car around.
But as he reached the curb, his hand suddenly clutched his chest. His knees buckled, his cane slipped from his grip and clattered against the wet pavement. "Dad?" Ethan called out. But his father didn't answer. He collapsed, hard. The world seemed to tilt. Rain blurred the edges of everything. Ethan froze for half a beat, unable to process the sight of the strongest man he had ever known crumpling like paper. "Call 911!" someone shouted behind him. But before Ethan could reach his father, a figure emerged from the dim sidewalk. A figure who moved faster than anyone else. Maya. She had been only a half block away when she heard the crash of something hitting the ground. She didn't think. She ran. Her shoes splashed through puddles, her breath sharp in the cold night air. Her jacket clung to her skin, soaked. But she dropped to her knees beside Mr. Ward without hesitation. "Sir, can you hear me?" she said, voice calm though her pulse hammered. His breathing was shallow, uneven. Ethan stumbled toward them. "Dad! Dad!" "Give me space," Maya said, firm but controlled. "I need to keep him stabilized." Ethan blinked, startled, confused by both her authority and the familiarity of her voice. The waitress from 10 minutes ago was gone. This was someone else, someone trained, steady, unshaken. "I already called 911, a woman from the valet stand yelled. "Good," Maya replied, placing 2 fingers on Mr. Ward's neck to check his pulse. "His heartbeat is irregular. Sir, stay with me, okay?" Rain pooled around them, soaking through her clothes.
Her knees hurt against the concrete, but she didn't move. When Mr. Ward's eyes fluttered, she immediately switched to Italian. Smooth, comforting, natural. "Signore, ascolti la mia voce. Resta sveglio con me. Aiuta il tuo respiro." "Sir, listen to my voice. Stay awake with me. Follow your breath." Ethan's jaw fell open. You speak Italian?" he stammered. But Maya didn't look at him. Her focus was entirely on his father. Mr. Ward's fingers twitched weakly. He tried to speak, but only a soft murmur escaped. "You're doing great," Maya said, squeezing his hand gently. "Help is almost here." The rain came down harder. Cars slowed as they passed, headlights sweeping over the scene like spotlights in a film.
People gathered under umbrellas near the restaurant entrance, whispering as they watched a soaked waitress take control of a billionaire's emergency, as if she'd trained for this moment all her life. Ethan knelt beside her, panic rising in his chest. "Dad, please, just stay with us." "Let him breathe," Maya said softly but firmly. "Your panic will become his panic." Ethan looked at her then, really looked at her. She was kneeling in the rain, lips pressed into a thin line of focus, curls plastered to her forehead, jacket dripping onto the pavement. Her hands didn't tremble. Her voice didn't shake. If anything, she was steadier than he was. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, growing brighter. Maya kept speaking to Mr. Ward, first in English, then in Italian, switching seamlessly when his eyes seemed to respond to familiar words. Ethan swallowed hard, guilt washing through him. He had called her just a server. Just a server. Yet here she was, saving his father's life. The ambulance finally arrived, sirens echoing between buildings. Paramedics rushed out, kneeling beside them. "What's his condition?" one asked. "Possible arrhythmia," Maya replied quickly. "Pulse weak but present. He's semi-responsive." The paramedic nodded, almost impressed. "Good call." As they lifted Mr. Ward onto the stretcher, his hand slipped from Maya's. She stood slowly. Her legs were stiff from the cold pavement, and she swayed slightly before catching her balance.
Ethan stepped toward her as if to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to thank her. But Maya stepped back. Her face was calm. Too calm. Like someone who'd had to hold herself together too many times. The paramedics loaded his father into the ambulance, and Ethan climbed in after them. Just before the doors closed, he looked out into the rain. Maya stood under the streetlight, soaked to the bone, hair dripping, face unreadable. She looked like someone used to being needed, but not necessarily valued. Their eyes met. For the first time, Ethan felt something unfamiliar, a knot in his chest. Shame, confusion, something harder to ignore. The doors slammed shut. The ambulance sped away into the night. Maya turned back toward the sidewalk, breathing out slowly.
The cold air hit her lungs, making her chest ache. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the wet pavement where moments ago she had knelt beside a dying man. The rain kept falling. She didn't know that what she had done tonight, this quiet act of kindness, was about to pull her entire life into the path of a man who had never been told no, never been humbled, never had to look in the mirror and see himself through someone else's eyes. She didn't know Ethan Ward's world had begun to crack open, and she definitely didn't know how much her silence and her strength were about to matter. The ambulance lights faded into the wet Baltimore streets, leaving behind a strange quiet that didn't match the chaos of moments before. The restaurant had gone still after the crowd dispersed. Even the rain seemed to soften, as if the sky itself was catching its breath. Maya stood alone under the streetlight for a long moment, water dripping from her sleeves. Her heartbeat finally slowed, but the tension in her shoulders refused to leave. She had saved a man tonight, but she felt no triumph, just an ache somewhere deep beneath her ribs. She turned away and continued her walk home, her shoes squishing softly with each step. The night smelled of wet asphalt, old brick buildings, and the bitterness of espresso from the cafe closed 2 blocks down. It was familiar, predictable. Nothing about her life ever changed. Not really. Except tonight, something had shifted. Something she wouldn't see the shape of until it was too late to pretend nothing happened. Meanwhile, miles across town, the ambulance doors opened into the glare of the emergency room entrance. Nurses rushed forward, guiding Mr. Raymond Ward onto a gurney. Ethan stayed close, his suit soaked, his hair plastered against his forehead. He looked nothing like the immaculate billionaire from the restaurant. He looked like a son, terrified of losing the person who had taught him everything he knew about grit. "Mr. Ward, can you hear me?" a nurse asked. His father blinked weakly. The girl," he murmured. Ethan stepped closer. "Dad, don't talk. You need to relax." Mr. Ward's hand twitched toward him.
"The girl, she kept me awake." One of the nurses looked up. "Did she administer CPR or speak to him before we arrived?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Yes, she did." "She helped stabilize him," another medic added. "If she hadn't talked him through his breathing, this might have gone very differently." Ethan tensed. Praise wasn't unsettling for him. He lived on praise. But this was about a waitress he had dismissed without thinking, a woman he'd insulted in a language he assumed she didn't understand. He rubbed his temples, remembering her voice. Calm, steady, gentle. And then he remembered her Italian, as smooth and natural as spring water. None of it made sense. By the time his father was wheeled into a room for testing, Ethan was pacing the hallway, unable to sit still. Droplets from his soaked suit left faint trails on the polished tile floor. His phone buzzed constantly. Texts from business partners, reminders about meetings, messages from people who expected the world to orbit him. He ignored them all. Instead, a single question consumed him. Who is she? He replayed the night in his mind. Her face composed even in the rain, her hands steady on his father's chest. Her command of a language she shouldn't have known if she was just a server. The realization hit him like cold water. She had understood every word he'd said at dinner. Every cruel, careless word. He closed his eyes, shame creeping up the back of his neck. He had spoken about her like she couldn't possibly have a history worth knowing.
Like she couldn't possibly be more than what he assumed. He sank into a chair outside his father's room, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. For the first time in a long while, he felt small. A doctor finally approached. "Mr. Ward?" Ethan stood immediately. "How is he?" "He's stable," the doctor said. "We're keeping him overnight, but it appears the quick response prevented a much more serious outcome." Quick response. Ethan heard the unspoken truth. He hadn't been the quick one. She had. "Can I see him?" he asked. The doctor nodded, leading him inside. Mr. Ward looked pale beneath the fluorescent lights, but his eyes were open. Weak, but aware. Ethan sat beside him, feeling a tightness in his chest he rarely allowed himself to feel.
"Dad, I'm here." His father lifted a shaky hand. Ethan caught it gently. "The girl," Mr. Ward whispered again. "She knew Italian." "I know," Ethan replied, voice low. "I didn't expect—" His father's brows furrowed faintly. "Son, you always look at people from above. Sometimes you need to look straight at them. See who they really are." Ethan stiffened. His father rarely offered life lessons so bluntly. It was as if he could sense the truth Ethan didn't want to admit. "She saved my life," Mr. Ward whispered. "I know," Ethan said again, throat tightening. "Thank her," his father murmured. "Not as a billionaire, as a man." The words struck deep. Ethan squeezed his father's hand, his mind already racing. Not with corporate strategies or stock forecasts, but with the image of Maya walking alone into the rain. He had to find her, but he didn't know that Maya, at that very moment, was climbing the stairs to her small apartment. She unlocked the door quietly so she wouldn't wake her mother. Inside, the dim kitchen light cast long shadows across chipped countertops and a stack of medical bills on the table. She shrugged off her wet jacket and hung it on a chair. Her feet were numb, her fingers cold, but she moved silently toward her mother's bedroom to make sure she was still breathing comfortably. When she heard the soft rise and fall of steady breaths, relief washed through her. At least tonight hadn't stolen anything more from her. She returned to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and stood by the window. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the city lights outside. What a night. She knew it wouldn't change anything. She'd saved a stranger's life, but tomorrow morning she'd still wake up to a schedule she couldn't escape and a paycheck that barely survived the month. Kindness didn't pay bills. Still, something about the man's eyes, Mr. Ward's eyes, stuck with her. The fear, the fragility, the gratitude she sensed even as he struggled to breathe. She would do it again. For anyone. Without hesitation. She rubbed her arms against the cold sinking into her bones. She didn't know that tomorrow someone would come looking for her, not to mock her, not to underestimate her, but to uncover a truth he had sensed only in a flash of panic and rain. She didn't know that saving one man tonight had quietly rewritten the course of the next 100 days of her life. And she didn't know that Ethan Ward, for the first time in years, had learned the meaning of humility in a single moment he couldn't forget. They were two lives moving in opposite directions. But fate had already decided their paths were going to collide again, sooner than she expected. The next morning, Harbor Lights Grill was wrapped in the soft gray of a Baltimore dawn. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining, as if the whole city had been rinsed clean overnight. Inside the restaurant, the warm yellow lights hummed to life as the prep crew sliced vegetables, clattered pans, and set tables for the early lunch rush. The quiet before opening hour was usually Maya's favorite time of day, a brief moment where the world wasn't demanding things from her. But today, nothing felt quiet. Nothing felt light. She tied her apron tighter around her waist, ignoring the dull ache in her back and the slight soreness in her knees from kneeling on wet pavement the night before. Her hair was braided neatly, her uniform clean. Small victories she clung to. She needed them to feel like she was still holding her life together. Her manager, Mr. Collins, emerged from his office already frowning. He was a man who always seemed one complaint away from a headache.
"There you are," he said sharply. "We need to talk." Maya felt her stomach tighten. "Is something wrong?" He waved a stack of papers in the air. "Yes, something is wrong. I got a call from the owner late last night. Apparently there was a scene outside the restaurant. Paramedics, crowds, people recording." "That wasn't me," Maya said quickly. "Mr. Ward collapsed. I don't care what happened." His tone was flat, dismissive. "What I care about is that the VIP table from last night complained about slow service. They said your disappearance made the table feel unattended." Her lips parted in disbelief. "I left for less than a minute. His father—" Collins held up a hand. "Please don't make excuses. This place runs on expectations. You know that." Heat rose in her chest. Anger, frustration, the sting of being blamed simply because she was an easy target. "You want to know what I was doing?" she said quietly. "I was saving his life." Collins sighed as though she were being dramatic. "Look, Maya, you're one of our best, but don't get emotional. It's not professional." The words cut deeper than he likely realized. Professional. As if caring about someone's life was unprofessional. As if she should have just watched a man collapse and politely waited for someone else to handle it. Before she could respond, the door swung open and Lena hurried inside, cheeks flushed. "Maya," she whispered urgently. "He's here." "Who?" Maya asked. Lena tilted her head toward the dining room. "The man from last night."
The billionaire. Maya's pulse skipped. She wasn't ready to see him. Not like this. Not after everything he'd said, and everything she'd done in spite of it. Collins straightened his tie. Good. Maybe he's here to apologize for the complaint. He smoothed his hair and stepped toward the double doors. "Follow my lead." Maya didn't move. Every emotion from the night before tangled inside her. Hurt, exhaustion, pride, fear of what he might say, dread of what he wouldn't. In the dining room, Ethan Ward stood near the bar, looking strangely out of place without his usual smirk. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes looked tired, worried, almost human. When he saw Maya, something like relief washed over his face. But Collins pushed forward first. "Mr.
"Ward," he said with forced cheer. "Welcome back. Wonderful to see you. We're sorry for any inconvenience." "I'm not here for you." Ethan said plainly, never taking his eyes off Maya. Collins blinked. I see. Maya froze as Ethan approached her. The clatter of plates in the background faded. The hum of conversation softened. Time seemed to slow around them. Maya, he said quietly. She didn't reply. She couldn't. Her body remained still, bracing itself. What you did last night. Ethan hesitated, searching for the right words, something unfamiliar to him. You saved my father. You were calm, prepared, selfless. I don't know how to thank you. Her expression stayed neutral. Your father needed help. That's all. Ethan swallowed, guilt flickering across his features. I owe you more than that. And I owe you an apology. I said things, unfair things. Things you understood, even though I assumed you couldn't. Collins looked back and forth between them, confused, sensing something important but not understanding it. Maya shifted her weight slightly. You don't need to apologize. Yes, Ethan said firmly. I do. But Maya wasn't interested in soothing his conscience. You said what you really thought, she replied softly. That's the truth of it. Ethan flinched at her honesty. It was the first time in years someone had spoken to him without sugarcoating or strategic courtesy. She wasn't impressed by his money. She wasn't flattered by his attention. She wasn't grateful for his apology. That humbled him more than anything else could. Collins broke the tension with a nervous laugh. Well, now that everything is settled, it isn't, Ethan interrupted. Collins stiffened. Ethan turned back to Maya. I'd like to speak with you privately if that's all right. She hesitated. A part of her wanted to walk away, to shield herself from whatever this was turning into. Another part, the part that longed for dignity, refused to let fear make her small. 5 minutes, she said finally. Collins tried to protest, but Ethan silenced him with a firm glance. Maya led the way to the back hallway near the service station, the hum of kitchen noise filling the space between them. When they stopped beside the supply shelves, Ethan spoke first. My father wants to thank you personally. He remembers your voice. He remembers you're Italian. Maya's throat tightened. She hadn't expected that. Ethan continued, quieter now. He told me I should look at people differently, that I've forgotten how. Maya didn't soften. She kept her gaze steady. What do you want from me, Mr. Ward? I want to make things right. Her jaw tensed. Some things you can't fix with money. He looked pained. I know. The hallway fell silent. Maya stepped back, creating space between them. Your father survived. That's what matters. There was more he wanted to say. She could see it in his posture, in the way he opened his mouth, then closed it again. But before he could speak, Collins appeared at the end of the hall. Maya, he barked. I need you on the floor, now. Ethan stiffened at the tone.
Maya gave a small nod. I should go. Ethan watched her walk away, frustration and admiration tangled in his chest. She was a mystery he couldn't unravel, and for once, he didn't want the easy answers. He wanted the truth behind her silence, her composure, her pain, and why she had helped him anyway. As she slipped back into the dining room, shoulders straight, head high, Ethan realized something unsettling. He had underestimated 1,000 people in his life, but Maya Carter was the first one who made him regret it. And she had no idea he wasn't finished with her story yet. By the time her shift ended, the sky outside had turned a bruised purple shade of dusk, thick clouds rolling across Baltimore like slow-moving waves.
The glow of passing headlights swept across the storefront windows, painting fleeting streaks of gold over the dining room walls. Maya wiped down her last table, the cloth trembling slightly in her hand. She wished it was from exhaustion, but deep down she knew it was something heavier. All day, whispers had followed her, co-workers glancing over, curious customers watching her longer than usual, Mr. Collins shooting her looks as if waiting for something to go wrong again. And Ethan had stepped back into her life like a storm wind, stirring everything she had tried to keep still. She wanted peace tonight. Just a simple walk home, a quiet dinner, her mother resting comfortably. But life rarely offered peace to people who needed it most.
"To Maya," Collins called out, leaning against the kitchen doorway. "Before you go, we need to discuss your schedule." She froze. "My schedule?" Collins crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "We got another complaint from a customer today. Something about you being distracted, slow. This can't continue." Her eyebrows knit together. "I wasn't slow. Intent doesn't matter. Perception does." He tapped his pen on the clipboard. "Starting next week, you'll work fewer evening shifts." Her chest tightened. Evening shifts paid more. Evening shifts kept the lights on. Evening shifts bought her mother's medication. "I can't lose those hours," she said softly. "You know that." Collins sighed, as if she were asking him for something unreasonable.
"Then don't give customers a reason to complain." A rush of heat flooded her cheeks. She had held her tongue all day, pushing everything down, burying the lump in her throat. But this was the quiet cruelty she couldn't fight. The kind that hid behind polite tones and managerial phrases. Before she could muster a reply, her phone buzzed. Her mother's neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. Her heart lurched. "Maya, honey," the woman's voice came through the phone, trembling with worry. "Something's wrong. Your mother, she collapsed in the kitchen. The ambulance just took her. They're taking her to Mercy Hospital." Everything inside Maya went still. Not the silence of calm, the silence of something breaking. "I'll be right there," she whispered, voice cracking. She hung up and rushed to grab her jacket. Collins tried to speak, maybe an attempt at sympathy, maybe frustration, but she didn't hear him. She pushed out the restaurant door and into the cold night air. Rain had begun again, a thin drizzle catching the streetlights like falling glitter. She ran down the sidewalk, her shoes slapping against the wet pavement, cars honking as she crossed without waiting for lights. The city blurred around her, neon signs, bus stops, silhouettes of people smoking outside bars. All she could think was, not her, not again. Please, not again. By the time she reached the hospital, her breath was ragged, her uniform soaked through, her fingers numb from gripping the bus railing too tightly. Inside, the waiting room buzzed with quiet tension.
Nurses moved briskly. Machines beeped rhythmically behind the wall. Families whispered anxiously. Maya stumbled to the desk. "My mother," she said breathlessly. "Lily Carter. She was brought in a few minutes ago." The nurse typed quickly. "She's being examined now. You can take a seat." "I'll stand," Maya murmured, unable to be still. Minutes stretched like hours. Her legs trembled, her chest felt tight, and every worst-case scenario flashed in her mind. Her mother had always been fragile since the heart attack 2 years ago. Lately, the stress of bills and medication shortages had worsened things. Maya had tried to make it seem okay, strong on the outside, terrified on the inside. Finally, a doctor approached. His expression was neutral, not comforting, not alarming, but neutral rarely meant good. "Maya Carter?" She stepped forward. "Yes. How is she?" "She experienced a cardiac episode," he said gently. "We've stabilized her, but she needs immediate and ongoing treatment." and unfortunately, the insurance on her profile was declined. Maya felt her knees weaken. No insurance, no money, no options. Her voice cracked. "What do I need to do? Just tell me." Before the doctor could answer, a security guard approached. "Miss Carter, someone's requesting to see you." She blinked. "Me? Who?" The guard pointed toward the glass doors of the entrance. A black sedan sat outside, headlights off. The rear door opened, and Ethan Ward stepped out. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes held exhaustion and something sharper, concern. He walked toward the hospital entrance with purpose, as if he belonged anywhere he chose to be. But tonight, he didn't feel like a billionaire walking into a board meeting. He felt like a son trying to repay a debt that humility had finally let him see clearly. Maya's heart pounded. Confusion warred with fear, anger with disbelief. This wasn't the time. She didn't have room for him. Not his apology, not his presence, not his world pressing into hers. But Ethan stopped in front of her and spoke softly. "I'm here because the hospital called me," he said. "They contacted me after they couldn't reach you." She frowned. "Why would they call you?" He hesitated, long enough for her breath to catch. "Because," he finally said, "your mother's hospital fees from last night were paid under my emergency authorization, and they called to confirm today's extension." The world tilted for a moment. The lights above her flickered. The steady hum of the waiting room dimmed. "You paid for her?" she whispered. "I owed you more than gratitude," Ethan said. "Your mother deserves care. You deserve peace." Her throat tightened painfully. "You shouldn't be here." "Maybe not," he replied softly. "But neither should you, alone, without help, carrying everything by yourself." His words hit something raw inside her. Not pity, recognition.
For the first time, she looked at Ethan not through the lens of his insult, but through the lens of the man kneeling in the rain beside his father, terrified and helpless. Still, she shook her head. "This isn't your responsibility." "Maybe not," Ethan said. "But I'm making it my responsibility anyway." Before she could argue, the doctor returned. "Miss Carter, your mother is resting. You may see her now." Maya drew a shaky breath and stepped toward the hallway. But before disappearing around the corner, she glanced back at Ethan. He stood silently, watching her with the expression of someone who wasn't sure whether he had crossed a line, or finally, done something right.
And as she walked into her mother's room, Maya realized something unsettling. Her life had begun to intertwine with his in ways she hadn't chosen, ways she wasn't sure she wanted, ways that could save her or break her. Only time would reveal which. The hospital room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a single overhead lamp and the rhythmic blink of the heart monitor beside her mother's bed. Machines hummed gently, creating a strange kind of lullaby that clung to the air like a whispered warning. Maya sank into the chair beside the bed, her wet jacket draped over her knees. Her mother's breathing was slow but steady, rising and falling beneath thin cotton blankets. "Mom?" Maya whispered, brushing a curl from the woman's forehead.
"You scared me." Her mother didn't respond, still sedated, still pale. The sight made something deep inside Maya twist painfully. She felt small in the quiet room, swallowed by helplessness. When she leaned back, she realized how cold her hands were. She hadn't even noticed them shaking. All she wanted was a normal life, a calm day, a moment to breathe. But life had never given her gentleness without first demanding a piece of her strength. She sat there for nearly an hour, watching the monitor, listening to rain tapping faintly against the window. Nurses walked past her door from time to time, their shoes squeaking softly on polished floors. The world outside kept moving, But Maya remained still, pinned to the present by worry and exhaustion.
When her mother finally stirred, Maya leaned forward. "Hey," she said softly. "I'm right here." Her mother blinked groggily, then offered a tired smile. "Baby, what are you doing here so late?" "You collapsed," Maya whispered. "You scared Mrs. Henderson." Her mother tried to apologize, but her voice faded into a sigh. "I just felt dizzy. Didn't want to bother you." Maya's throat tightened. "You're never a bother." Her mother squeezed her hand weakly. "You work so hard. You shouldn't have to take care of me and the whole world at the same time." But that was exactly what Maya felt she'd been doing for years, carrying more than she ever admitted, giving more than she had, loving with everything she could spare. She stayed until her mother drifted back asleep.
When she stepped into the hallway, the air felt colder, sharper. A nurse handed her a discharge estimate, and the price made her stomach drop. It was more than a month's rent, more than she had. When she walked out through the automatic hospital doors, she expected the night to swallow her quietly. Instead, headlights blinked on from the curb. Ethan's sedan. He stepped out the moment he saw her. His suit jacket was gone, replaced by a simple sweater and dark slacks. It was the first time he didn't look like a man carrying Wall Street on his shoulders. He looked, unexpectedly, like someone unsure of his place in the world. "Maya," he said, not too loudly, not too softly. "What are you still doing here?" she asked, exhaustion sharpening her tone. He swallowed. "Waiting."
"I wanted to know if your mother was all right." A part of her softened at that. A larger part braced itself. "She's stable," Maya said. "They're keeping her overnight." He nodded slowly. "Good." Wind pushed through the parking lot, stirring loose leaves and making the streetlights flicker. Ethan slid his hands into his pockets, staring at the pavement for a moment, before lifting his gaze again. "I know you don't want my help," he said. "And you don't have to accept it. But I need you to know something." She tightened her arms around herself. "What?" "My father asked about you," Ethan said quietly. "He asked about the woman who kept him calm. He doesn't forget faces easily. He wants to thank you properly." "That's not necessary," Maya said quickly.
Ethan stepped closer. Not enough to invade her space, but enough to show sincerity. "I know you think I'm doing this out of guilt, and maybe part of me is, but another part—" He hesitated, his breath visible in the cool night air. "Another part knows I misjudged you, and I hate that I did." Maya didn't respond. Her eyes drifted toward the wet pavement. She wasn't used to people admitting fault, not honestly, not without expecting credit for doing so. "I'm not here to interfere," he added. "Just tell me if you need anything. Anything at all." She shook her head. "You don't even know me." "That's exactly why I'm trying to fix things." The rawness in his voice surprised her. It wasn't polished or rehearsed. It wasn't the voice of a billionaire used to negotiating from the top of the world. It was the voice of a man trying, awkwardly and earnestly, to make himself smaller so she wouldn't feel small beside him. She exhaled a long, tired breath. "I'm going home. It's late." "I can drive you." "No." Her answer was immediate. He accepted it with a nod. "Then, at least take this." He reached into his coat and pulled out a white envelope. Plain, unmarked. He held it out, his hand steady. Maya stared at it. "What is that?" "Just something I think you need," he said softly. "I'm not taking your money." "It's not money." She didn't move, so Ethan gently set the envelope on the bench beside her. "If you don't want it," he said, "throw it away. But please, at least look inside before you do." She didn't pick it up. She couldn't, not yet. Trust didn't come easily to her, especially from men with power and smooth apologies. Without pressing further, Ethan stepped back toward his car. "Good night, Maya." She didn't reply. She watched the sedan pull away, taillights glowing red in the mist until they disappeared around the corner. Then she finally sank onto the bench. Rain from the awning dripped rhythmically onto the sidewalk. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Her fingers hovered over the envelope before she finally opened it. Inside was a single document, a confirmation of premium health insurance, fully covered. No signature, no sender name. Only a hospital authorization code and an effective date. Today. Her breath caught. He hadn't just helped her mother. He'd quietly ensured she would never face this exact fear again. Her eyes stung, not with weakness, but with the weight of being seen in a world that so often ignored her. But kindness, even from someone she didn't trust, came with its own kind of burden. And as she held the paper in her trembling hands, one question pressed into her heart like a whisper she couldn't escape. What does he want from me? She didn't know the real twist wasn't what he wanted from her. It was what he would soon discover about her life, her past, and her brilliance, and how deeply it would shake the world he thought he understood.
The morning after her mother's hospitalization, Harbor Light's grill buzzed with its usual mix of sizzling pans, clinking glasses, and the faint smell of toasted bread drifting across the kitchen. But for Maya, the air felt heavier, thicker, as if the world had piled itself onto her shoulders overnight. She moved quietly between tables, offering practiced smiles, but anyone who looked closely enough would have seen the exhaustion hiding beneath her eyes. Her co-workers whispered among themselves. The manager avoided her gaze, and customers who had seen last night's commotion stole glances when they thought she wasn't looking. Still, she worked, because that's what Maya did, no matter what fell apart around her. Across the city, however, a very different kind of morning unfolded.
Inside a sleek, glass-walled office on the 42nd floor of Ward Innovations, sunlight poured across polished floors and illuminated a man who hadn't slept at all. Ethan stood at the center of his office, surrounded by digital screens and scattered papers. His tie was loosened, his hair uncharacteristically untidy. But the change wasn't in his appearance. It was in his expression. On his desk lay a printed set of university records, files he wasn't supposed to have, but had requested through discreet channels once he learned Maya Carter's full name from the insurance documents he'd received back from the hospital. He told himself it wasn't invasive. He told himself he simply wanted to understand the person who'd saved his father. But as he flipped through the pages, something inside him twisted. "Maya Carter," he murmured under his breath. "Who are you?" Her academic history unfolded like a story he couldn't put down. Top of her class, a double major in linguistics and anthropology, fluent in 5 languages, recipient of the university's prestigious research grant, recommended for international study. Then, a sudden withdrawal, a note, family medical emergency. No further explanation. Her brilliance had been rising like a phoenix, only to be smothered mid-flight. Ethan sank into his chair, running a hand through his hair. He thought he understood the world. He thought he knew exactly what ambition looked like, what genius looked like, what determination required. But this woman, this waitress he had dismissed, had lived an entire life he couldn't have imagined. He closed his eyes, hearing her voice again, guiding his father through a crisis with a calmness few professionals possessed. He remembered the way she held her sorrow tightly, like someone who didn't have the luxury of falling apart. And for the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest. Respect. Pure, unfiltered, unearned respect. He stood abruptly, grabbing his jacket. "Cancel my morning meetings," he said to his assistant. "Sir?" she asked, confused. "I have somewhere to be." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. He was already out the door. At Harbor Lights Grill, the lunch crowd had begun to settle in. Silverware clinked against plates. Coffee machines hissed, and sunlight poured across the dining room in wide golden stripes. Maya refilled a family's water glasses, offering a polite smile, though her mind remained elsewhere. Her mother, her bills, the envelope from last night still tucked into her purse like a weight she didn't know how to carry. Then the restaurant door swung open. A hush fell. Not loud or dramatic, but enough that Maya sensed the shift before she looked up. Ethan stood at the entrance. Today there was no arrogance in his posture, no swagger in his step. He wore a gray sweater, dark slacks, and a look of uncertainty that softened the sharp lines of his usual confidence. Customers whispered, recognizing him. Lena nudged Maya gently. "Oh, Lord," she muttered. "He's here for you again." Maya's pulse quickened. "I'm not talking to him while I'm working." But fate didn't care about her schedule. Ethan approached the host stand. "Is Maya Carter working this shift?" The hostess blinked, starstruck. Yes, she's right." Maya stepped forward, cutting the girl off. "Mr. Ward, this isn't appropriate." "I know," he said softly. "But I need to speak with you." "I'm on the clock." "Then I'll wait." He walked to an empty booth near the window and sat down, hands clasped, eyes fixed on her like she was the only person in the room. And though Maya tried to ignore him, tried to focus on orders, on tables, on tasks, his presence followed her like a shadow. Every time she looked up, he was still there, waiting. She lasted 20 minutes before giving in. With a quiet sigh, she approached his table. 5 minutes, she said. "That's all I can spare." Ethan nodded, standing as she arrived, a gesture she didn't expect. "Thank you." "Please sit," she said, keeping her voice steady. "What do you want?" He didn't sit. He reached into his bag and placed a single sheet of paper on the table, one that made her stomach drop. Her university transcript. Her eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" "I shouldn't have," he admitted. "But I needed to understand what I was looking at." Her pulse raced, a mix of embarrassment and anger rising inside her. Her past was the last thing she wanted strangers digging into, especially him. "You had no right," she said quietly, her voice trembling not from fear, but from a lifetime of being unseen until someone wanted something. "I know," he repeated, "and I'm sorry, truly. But when the hospital sent back the insurance authorization, I saw your full name, and I recognized it." She froze. "Recognized it?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Your paper on linguistic pattern development. I read it years ago. It circulated in a tech symposium. I never knew the author was a 20-year-old student." She stared at him, stunned. "You wrote like someone 40, he added softly. Someone who had lived in 10 countries, not one city. She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She felt exposed, cracked open in a way she didn't consent to. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered. "Because," Ethan said gently, "you're not meant to be here forever. You're not meant to disappear into a job that doesn't see you. And I think, maybe, I can help. Her heart clenched. Mr. Ward, Ethan, he corrected softly. Please. She shook her head. Ethan, I don't need saving. I know you don't, he said. But sometimes, even the strongest people deserve to be lifted, just once, so they can see the world from where they were always meant to stand. Her breath hitched. For a moment, she didn't trust herself to speak. But before she could respond, Collins appeared behind her, arms crossed, face tense. Maya, he said sharply, I need a word, now. She turned slowly, dread creeping up her spine.
Is something wrong? Collins held up a slip of paper. You're being written up for abandoning your section. I didn't abandon. You walked away from customers. This is strike 2, Maya. One more and you're out. Her stomach dropped. Everything in her life, her mother, her bills, her fragile stability, wobbled on the edge of collapse. She felt Ethan's presence behind her, quiet, burning with anger he didn't show. But Maya didn't turn to him. Not yet. She looked at her manager, then at the floor, then at the transcript still on the table. And in that moment, she realized something. Her life was unraveling from all sides, not because she was weak, but because she had outgrown the world that underestimated her. Ethan saw it. Her manager feared it.
And Maya wasn't ready to confront it. Not yet. But soon. Very soon. The truth would force her to. The rest of the shift passed in a fog, as if the world had slipped behind a pane of glass. Voices blurred together, plates clattered in distant echoes, and the hum of conversation became a low, constant drone pressing against Maya's ears. She moved through the restaurant like a ghost, present, but only barely. Her hands worked from habit, not focus. Her smile was polite, but thin. Every time she reached for a water pitcher or set down a plate, her eyes drifted toward the booth where Ethan had been sitting. But he was gone. Only the empty booth remained. Quiet, undisturbed. The sunlight shifting across the surface of the table he had leaned against while unraveling pieces of her past. She hated how relieved she felt. And how disappointed. When the final hour crawled by, she clocked out, untied her apron, and stepped outside into the fading glow of afternoon. Golden sunlight hit the slick asphalt, turning puddles into mirrors that held tiny pieces of sky. She breathed in deeply, hoping the crisp air would clear her mind, but the weight on her chest didn't lift. She began the walk home, passing familiar row houses with peeling paint, small corner stores bustling with teenagers buying snacks, and neighbors sitting on stoops exchanging stories they'd already told a dozen times. Comforting sounds. Grounding sounds. But tonight, none of them anchored her. When she reached her building, a narrow brick complex with balconies that sagged slightly under years of weather, she wasn't expecting anything unusual. She certainly wasn't expecting to find a small box sitting on her doorstep. No name, no return address, just a simple brown box, sealed neatly with clear tape. She hesitated before picking it up. The cardboard felt warm from sitting in the sun. She carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it, as if it might disappear if she blinked. Her mother was resting in the bedroom. The apartment smelled faintly of chamomile tea and lavender balm. Normally, the scent calmed her. Tonight, it only made the tightness in her chest more unbearable. She opened the box carefully. Inside was a neatly folded sheet of paper, atop a hardbound book, with her name embossed across the front in gold lettering. Maya Carter, Research Portfolio, Restored Edition. Her breath caught. Hands trembling, she unfolded the note. You deserve to see yourself the way the world should have seen you all along. E.W. Her heart stuttered. She opened the portfolio. It was a curated collection of her academic work. Papers she'd written, annotated notes, research summaries, even a proposal she'd never finished submitting because her mother fell ill. He had restored all of it. He had hunted down every missing file. He had reassembled the version of her that life had forced her to abandon. And he had done it quietly. No applause, no announcement, no credit, just given it back to her. Her throat burned with emotion she didn't want to feel. Gratitude felt too close to dependence, and dependence was a danger she couldn't afford. Not when everything she had was held together with frayed threads. The apartment door buzzer suddenly rang, startling her. She wiped her eyes quickly and stepped to the intercom. Yeah? Her voice cracked slightly. It's Ethan. Her stomach dropped. She hesitated. A full 2 seconds, maybe 3. But then she pressed the door release. The stairwell echoed with muted footsteps as he climbed to the 3rd floor. When he appeared in the doorway, he didn't step inside. He waited, respectfully, cautiously, at the edge of her threshold. He looked different in civilian clothing. Jeans, a simple shirt, a light jacket. Less like the billionaire who owned half the tech space on the East Coast. More like a man trying to deserve forgiveness he hadn't earned yet. I didn't know if I should come up, he said quietly. But I hoped you'd let me. She crossed her arms, not defensive, just gathering herself. You shouldn't have gone through my academic records. I know, he said. And I'm sorry. But something about you. I knew there was more. I needed to understand how someone with your ability ends up being dismissed like... He cut himself off, wincing at the memory of his own words. Like I dismissed you, he finished. Maya looked down at the book on her table. You had no right to restore any of this. I didn't do it to intrude on your life, he said quickly. I did it so you wouldn't lose the pieces of yourself the world never should have taken. Her breath trembled. She hated how sincere he looked, how unpolished his voice sounded, how genuine he seemed for a man who lived in a world built on power. I don't need charity, she whispered. This isn't charity, Ethan said. This is me correcting a mistake. She shook her head. You don't even know me. I'm trying to, he replied. If you'll let me. Silence stretched between them. Thin, fragile, heavy. Finally, Maya exhaled. Why? Why do you care? He stepped forward, not enough to cross the threshold, but enough that the hallway light glinted softly off his eyes. Because when everyone else froze, he said, you ran toward danger.
Because you talked my father through the worst moment of his life. Because you didn't ask for anything. You didn't wait to be thanked. You didn't even look at me after it happened, like you expected nothing in return. He swallowed. And because I realized something that night, he continued. Strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it kneels in the rain without hesitation. Her lips parted slightly. Something inside her softened. Just a fracture, not a break. But before she could speak, her mother called weakly from the bedroom. Maya, baby, who's at the door? Maya turned. It's no one, Mom. Just a delivery. Ethan's expression shifted, hurt flickering across his features, only for a second, before he masked it. I should go, he murmured.
She nodded but didn't step forward to close the door. He paused at the stairwell. Maya? She looked up. That portfolio, he said. It's yours. Not because I gave it back, because you made it worth restoring. Their eyes held for one heartbeat. 2. Then he descended the stairs, leaving her alone in the doorway, with her pulse pounding and her world trembling on a hinge that could still swing either way. She closed the door gently. The apartment felt smaller now, and the book on the table looked like a future she wasn't ready to touch. Yet. She sank into a chair, eyes fixed on her restored past, her restored identity. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a luxury. It felt like a possibility. A terrifying one.
Because hope, like love and loss, could break a person just as easily as it healed them. And Maya Carter was standing at the edge of both. The next morning, she stood outside Mercy Hospital with a cup of weak vending machine coffee warming her palms. The sunrise painted gold streaks across Baltimore's skyline, turning the windows of distant office buildings into shards of light. She hadn't slept. Her mother's condition, the restored portfolio, Ethan's unexpected visit, all of it tangled inside her like a knot she couldn't loosen. She walked through the hospital doors and made her way toward her mother's room. Nurses smiled politely as she passed, but she barely registered them.
The steady beep of machines echoed softly down the hallway, each sound pulling her further into the reality she'd been trying to outrun. Inside the room, her mother was awake, flipping slowly through a magazine with shaky fingers. "Morning, sweetheart," her mother whispered. "Morning, Mom." Maya leaned down and kissed her forehead. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I look," her mother chuckled weakly, "though that doesn't say much these days." Maya smiled, but her heart ached. She pulled a chair close and sat. For a while, they spoke quietly, about nothing heavy, nothing painful. Just gentle conversation, the way people talk when life has cornered them, but they still find pockets of peace. But the peace didn't last. A knock sounded at the door. When Maya turned, her breath caught. Ethan Ward stood there with his father, Mr. Raymond Ward, leaning on a cane but looking stronger than she'd seen him. Ethan's hand hovered near his father's elbow, ready to catch him if he stumbled. The older man gave Maya a warm, genuine smile, and suddenly the air in the room felt charged with something tender, almost fragile. "Miss Carter," Mr. Ward said as he stepped inside. "I asked my son to bring me here." Maya stood out of instinct, unsure whether to feel honored or terrified. "Mr. Ward, you didn't have to—" "But I did," he interrupted gently. "Because I wanted to thank the woman who saved my life." Her mother's eyes widened. "Maya, you saved him?" Maya blushed. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Mr. Ward said firmly. "Not anyone."
"You." He took her hand briefly, warm, grateful. "Your composure, your voice, they kept me awake until help arrived. I remember every moment." Emotion tightened her throat. She didn't know what to say. Ethan stepped forward slightly, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Dad insisted. He didn't want to leave the hospital until he thanked you in person." Her mother touched her chest, moved. "My daughter's always been that way," she said quietly. "She takes care of everybody except herself." Maya shot her a look, embarrassed. But her mother wasn't wrong. Mr. Ward chuckled softly. "Then perhaps it's time the world takes care of her for a change." At that, Maya stiffened, not out of fear, but out of instinct. She didn't know how to accept care.
Not without wondering what strings were attached. Sensing her unease, Ethan cleared his throat. "If this is a bad time, It isn't, Maya said politely. But I don't want either of you overexerting yourselves. Mr. Ward smiled, touched by her concern. You're kind, but I'm stronger than I look, and I came here with a purpose. Her eyebrows rose. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Maya's stomach sank. She feared another bill, another piece of bad news. But when he handed it to her, she hesitated before opening it. Her eyes scanned the page. A scholarship award. A legitimate, university-backed reinstatement into her former linguistic program. Full tuition, books, housing stipend, all approved. She blinked, stunned. I don't understand.
How? Mr. Ward lifted a hand. I spent my younger years fighting for opportunities. When I learned your story, I knew the world had stolen one from you. I simply returned what should have been yours all along. She turned to Ethan, who stood silently, watching her reaction with an emotion she couldn't name. It's anonymous, he said quickly. No donor listed. You'd owe no one. Not me, not him. That detail broke something inside her. Tears stung her eyes, not from sadness, but from the unbearable weight of being seen in a way that felt almost holy. She pressed a hand to her mouth, struggling to breathe. Her mother gasped softly. Maya, this is what you dreamed of? She shook her head. I can't accept this. Mr. Ward's voice was gentle but firm. This isn't charity, Miss Carter. This is correction. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't know if I can go back, she whispered. I've been away too long. Life got complicated. My mother. We've handled that too, Ethan said quietly. Your mother's continued care is fully covered now. No deductibles. No gaps. You'll never receive another declined insurance notice. Her mother covered her mouth, overcome. Maya staggered back a step, gripping the foot of the hospital bed for support. Why? She whispered, looking between them. Why do all this for me? For a moment, neither man answered. Then Ethan spoke, his voice soft but clear. Because brilliance like yours shouldn't disappear into the background. Her breath trembled. Because you deserve to live the life you were meant for, Mr. Ward added. And because, Ethan finished, you changed my family's life the moment you knelt beside my father. Now, we want to change yours. Only if you choose it. The world seemed to tilt. The hallway noise faded. The steady beep of the heart monitor softened. The sunlight through the blinds painted warm stripes across her skin. Her past, her dreams, her sacrifices, everything collided in a single moment. She clutched the scholarship letter to her chest, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything, Ethan replied. Just tell us what your heart wants to do next. She didn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because the truth, the terrifying, beautiful truth, was beginning to form inside her. A truth that would change everything.
And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of it. 3 weeks passed like the slow unfurling of a new dawn. The air in Baltimore shifted from winter's bite to the first hesitant hints of spring. Trees along the sidewalks began pushing out pale green buds, and sunlight spilled across the city in longer, warmer strokes. Yet for Maya, the true season change was not outside. It was within her. Every morning she woke earlier than she had in years, heart pounding with a mix of terror and exhilaration. She had finally said yes. Yes to the scholarship, yes to the future she had once buried, yes to stepping back into a world that had once embraced her brilliance and then slipped from her fingers. The decision hadn't come easily.
She'd paced her apartment for hours the night she received the offer. her fingers brushing the embossed gold letters on her restored portfolio again and again. But when she thought of the life she wanted, not the life she had settled for, one truth echoed louder than fear. Her dreams had never died. They had only waited, and now she was ready to claim them. On her first day returning to the university, she stood at the base of the main building's stone steps, sunlight glinting off the massive windows. Students poured through the courtyard, laughing, talking, tapping away on their phones, and for a moment, she felt like a stranger stepping into a memory that no longer belonged to her. Until she heard her name. Amaya? She turned to see Professor Langford, silver hair, warm eyes, the same tweed jacket he wore the day she withdrew. He approached her with disbelief softening his features. "Is it really you?" She nodded, emotion swelling in her chest. "Hi, Professor. It's been a while." His eyes glistened. Too long, far too long. The department never understood why such a gifted mind suddenly vanished. The words hit her harder than expected. She swallowed. Life got complicated. He nodded knowingly. And now? She looked around. The ivy on the walls, the faint buzz of student chatter, the scent of old books drifting from the library windows, and for the first time, she felt she belonged again. "Now," she said, "I'm ready to finish what I started." Professor Langford's smile stretched wide.
The world will be better for it. He walked her to class, pointing out changes on campus, sharing updates about research programs. Students glanced at her curiously as she passed. Some greeted the professor, some nodded politely at her. But she felt none of the old anxiety she'd carried years ago. The fear of not being enough had quieted. The weight of expectations had shifted into something lighter, gentler, possible. When she entered her first lecture hall, light streamed through tall windows, illuminating rows of desks and shelves stacked with textbooks. She sat near the back, letting the murmurs of students fill the space around her. Then, just before the lecture started, the door opened. Ethan stepped inside. Not sharply dressed, not commanding attention. Just Ethan. In a simple jacket, hands in his pockets, looking both out of place and strangely human amid the rows of students. Her heart stumbled. He scanned the room until he found her. When their eyes met, the world seemed to still. He didn't approach her. He didn't wave. He simply nodded, gentle, supportive, proud. A gesture she never knew she needed. After class, Maya found him waiting by the courtyard fountain. Sunlight bounced off the rippling water, casting patterns across the pavement. "You didn't have to come here," she said, walking toward him. "I know," Ethan answered. "But I wanted to see your first step." She shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You're not subtle, you know." "Subtlety isn't my specialty," he admitted. "But sincerity. I'm trying to learn." The spark of humor in his eyes softened something inside her. They walked through the courtyard together, past blooming trees and groups of students sprawled on the grass. Her steps felt lighter. Her future felt brighter. "How's your father?" she asked. "He's recovering well," Ethan replied. "Keeps talking about meeting you again. He says you reminded him of someone he once knew. Someone who didn't bend in storms." Maya smiled quietly at that. They reached the edge of campus, where buses rumbled by and the scent of warm pastries drifted from a nearby bakery. She stopped and faced him. "You did a lot for me," she said softly. "More than I know how to thank you for." He shook his head. "I didn't do anything you didn't deserve."
"I just opened a door you had every right to walk through." She looked down, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared, Ethan." "Of what?" "Of failing, of leaving my mother alone, of hoping for too much. She sighed. I'm scared this will all disappear. Ethan took a step closer, careful not to overstep. Maya, everything worth having comes with fear. But fear means your heart is awake. And yours? He hesitated, searching for words that didn't trespass. Yours has carried more weight than most people could survive. She blinked back, the emotion rising in her eyes. And if you fall, he added softly, I promise you won't fall alone. Those words, more than his help or his generosity, cracked something open in her. Not dependence, not romance, trust, tentative, fragile, new. She drew a shaky breath and nodded. Thank you, Ethan. He smiled, not proudly, not arrogantly, but with genuine warmth. Go, he said gently. Learn. Build. Become who you were meant to be. She turned toward campus again, sunlight warming her shoulders, the wind brushing softly through her hair. As she walked back toward her next class, portfolio tucked under her arm, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. The sense that her life was no longer shrinking. It was expanding. And every step she took from here on out wouldn't just lead her back to who she was. It would lead her toward who she was finally ready to become. 1 year later, the auditorium lights dimmed as a crowd gathered beneath a canopy of golden bulbs strung across the ceiling.
The air buzzed with anticipation. Families straightening collars and fixing tassels, professors flipping through program sheets, students hugging friends they'd grown beside. The room glowed with pride, nerves, and the electricity of lives about to change. Backstage, Maya Carter stood alone for a moment, clutching her graduation cap to her chest. She had chosen a simple dress, deep navy, soft at the sleeves, practical yet elegant. Her curls framed her face, and tonight her smile felt steady, unforced, real. This was her day, her proof, her return. Her mother, seated in the front row with a nurse nearby, wiped at her eyes every few minutes.
She looked stronger now, color back in her cheeks, breath steady, palms clasped tightly as if holding on to a miracle she still couldn't believe was hers. Professor Langford stood by the curtain, peeking out before turning back to Maya. You know, he said, I've taught for 38 years, and I have never seen a comeback like yours. Maya laughed softly, her nerves easing. I had a lot of help. No, he corrected gently. You had support, but the work, the brilliance, the heart, that was all you. Before she could respond, the ceremony music began, soft brass rising over the crowd. Students lined up behind her. The curtain drew open inch by inch, revealing a sea of faces illuminated by warm auditorium lights. She wasn't ready. But she was ready. When her Rao stepped forward, she walked onto the stage with a quiet grace that drew every eye. She held her head high, not arrogantly, but with the gentle dignity of someone who had rediscovered her worth one painful step at a time. As she accepted her diploma, applause rose like a wave, loud, wholehearted, rolling across the room. Her mother cried openly now, hands covering her mouth, shoulders shaking with joy. But there was someone else in the room whose reaction cut deeper than the noise. Ethan Ward stood near the back, not in a special seat, not surrounded by bodyguards, not commanding attention. He wore a modest suit, blended into the crowd, clapping slowly, tenderly, like he was afraid of making the moment about him. Their eyes met, just for a second, but that second felt like the moment everything came full circle. After the ceremony, people flooded the campus lawn. The sky had turned a soft evening blue, strung with lights and alive with celebration. Graduates hugging, parents laughing, cameras flashing. Maya wove through the crowd until she reached her mother, who wrapped her in the tightest hug she'd received in years. I'm so proud of you, baby, her mother whispered into her hair. Thank you, Mom, Maya said, voice thick, for everything. Then softly from behind them, you earned every bit of this. She turned. Ethan stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets, smile warm but hesitant, as if still unsure whether he had the right to be part of this chapter of her life. She stepped toward him. You came, she said.
I wouldn't have missed it, he replied. Not for anything. She looked at him, really looked. The man who had once dismissed her had become someone entirely different. Softer, humble, changed. Not because of guilt or debt or redemption, but because he chose to be. What you did for me, she began. He shook his head gently. What you did for me mattered more. Before she could argue, he reached into his jacket and handed her a sealed envelope. This, he said, is something my father insisted on giving you today. Her breath caught. She opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a formal certificate, a fully funded grant to open a community language program in West Baltimore. Her name printed in bold, elegant letters at the top. The Carter Center for Language and Literacy. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. You're giving me a center? She whispered. No, Ethan said softly. We're giving Baltimore a center. One led by you. Built around your brilliance, your compassion, and your belief that language can change lives. Tears blurred her vision. My father wanted to be here, Ethan added, but his doctor advised him to rest today. He asked me to tell you something. Maya steadied herself. He said, Ethan continued gently, that waitress saved my life. That scholar is going to save thousands more. The words shattered her. Beautifully, painfully. She covered her mouth as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Ethan stepped closer, not touching her, but offering presence, warmth, steadiness. Everything she once refused to accept. Do you understand now? He asked softly. You weren't just a server. You were never just a server. She nodded, unable to speak. Emotions surged through her in waves. Pride, humility, grief, healing, joy. The weight of surviving. The relief of becoming. The beauty of being seen. When she finally found her voice, it was a whisper carried on the evening breeze. Thank you for believing in who I could be. Ethan smiled, something tender flickering in his eyes. No, Maya. Thank you for showing me who I needed to become. She laughed through her tears, a sound light enough to rise above the cheers and music around them. People celebrated all across the lawn, but for one moment, the world quieted around them, as if holding its breath for the story that had come full circle. The girl once dismissed as just a server, now stood ready to open a center that would change countless lives. Not because a billionaire saved her, but because her kindness had changed a billionaire. And in doing so, she had rewritten both of their futures. Come on, Maya said finally, wiping her cheeks. Let's go greet my students. Your students, Ethan repeated, smiling. That sounds perfect. And together, they walked into the warm glow of the crowd, toward a new beginning built not on charity, but on courage, gratitude, and the unstoppable strength of a woman who dared to rise. If this story touched your heart, drop a simple 1 in the comments so we know you're here with us.
And if you'd like more stories just like this, stories of hope, dignity, and unexpected redemption, make sure to subscribe. Your support helps us bring the next powerful story to life.